The Indochina Wars, a conflict that was present in Southeast Asia since 1946 going until 1989. The Vietnam War, the American War, or the Second Indochina War lasted from 1955 to 1975 and was a fight between the Communist China and Soviet-backed North and capitalist US-backed South. It was a war with tactics similar to World War I with war of attrition, and it was one of the worst military failures of the modern US. There are many ways that this can be blamed on one side, but we're going to look at two aspects: the Ho Chi Minh Trail and the US search and destroy missions.
The US had an air force of army bases throughout south and captured territories in the north, which it used for its search and destroy missions, initiated by the US commander in Vietnam, General Westmoreland.
As their opponents, the Viet Cong, were hard to identify and traveled in the dark, the US was unable to hold captured territory very long, as the guerrilla tactics used by the VC made the US forces very vulnerable, especially in this forest area.
When a US commander believed that he had found an area where Viet Cong were known to be, their goal was to kill them. General Westmoreland and his staff believed that if they could wear out the Viet Cong, they would give up the fight. The night prior to the attack of ground forces, Air Force planes would bomb the suspicious area, destroying anything that could be found, and made it easier for ground forces to be deployed the next day.
The next morning, US troops would be deployed via helicopter in the same area and search for VC hideouts. This provided especially struggling to the US forces, as the area was often jungle and the US Army training was not made for those, giving the VC another advantage over the US.
When the US forces would reach a village, it was nearly impossible for the United States to tell who was foe and who was friend. Therefore, the most common outcome was to incinerate the whole village. While this may have eliminated all the above-ground Viet Cong in the area, most of the Viet Cong was underground, and incineration runs did not necessarily make the population support the US forces.
At the end of the day, US forces had to retreat into their base camp, forgetting all of the day's progress and retreating back into the safety of their camps. But this was a good day for the US. If the US spotted VC forces hiding in the jungle area, the battle could turn out much worse for them. One of the many ambushes that the VC gave the US which were devastating to their forces and their morale was the Battle of Ong Tan on October 17, 1967. Lieutenant Colonel Terry Allen had received intelligence of VC forces in the nearby area, and the US forces now had the task to kill them all.
For the Alpha and Delta forces of the Black Lion Company, this was a regular day, a regular search and destroy mission. The planes had bombed the area last night, they felt ready to go into the jungle and kill the Viet Cong, and they left their night defensive position at around 8.
Unbeknownst to them, the VC knew about the upcoming attack. As it happened before, the planes bombing warned the VC that an attack was coming, so they prepared an ambush for the advancing US forces.
The Black Lion Alpha Company had found a used trail at around 10, and decided to investigate. As they approached the area, they did not know what was about to happen to them.
When the US forces were in VC reach, around 10:15, the massacre began. The Viet Cong under Colonel Vo Minh Thiet launched an attack on the right flank of the Alpha Company, covered by its 2nd platoon. Meanwhile, the 1st platoon was being held in place by fire coming from the front of the ambush.
After the explosion of a large mine, destroying the Alpha Company's communication, they were worn out. After half an hour, most of the company was dead and the fire continued.
It was at that point that the Delta Company approached. After errors made by Lieutenant Colonel Allen, the Viet Cong was able to gain superiority of the battle and up its fire intensity before unleashing the unused 3rd flank of the Delta Company, having created a 3-sided ambush on the Black Lions.
But as it was common, these battles ended abruptly and without warning.
From one moment to the next, all of the Viet Cong forces disappeared with the forest, moving on, without giving a chance to the US to damage the Viet Cong. The Viet Cong moved on to the next fight while the defeated US forces were left behind to retreat with what was left of their company.
The fights contained on destroying US forces. It was these attacks that were the failure of the United States in Vietnam, being ambushed by the Viet Cong and losing to them, without any chance of winning as the enemy is hidden and in the thick of the woods. These fights greatly lowered troop morale and energy, and the Viet Cong were able to gain superiority over the United States. The Battle of Ung Chang led to US casualties of 65 deaths, 75 injured, and 2 MIA, with only 22-sided Viet Cong casualties, even though 101 deaths was what the US had reported to make this seem less like an ambush and more like a win. The US tactics were not the only reason for failure. The Viet Cong guerrilla tactics played a major part in the success of their ambushes and attacks throughout South Vietnam.
The Ho Chi Minh Trail was the key to the success and supply of the Viet Cong in South Vietnam. The path traveled from the north through to the south, including using land in the neighboring countries of Cambodia and Laos. It was used by North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces to supply them with food and ammunition, and was a focus of attack of the US forces. While they bombed the areas in North and South Vietnam heavily to stop the supplies from reaching, After war conventions, the US was unable to stop the VC. While the armies in Laos and Cambodia, together with the CIA, laid offensives towards the trail, they were unable to stop it, as the trail was too big and too complex to be fully destroyed.
The Ho Chi Minh Trail was especially useful to the Viet Cong. It allowed them not only to bring in supplies to their supporters, but allowed them to launch bombs in Saigon and bring fear and terror into the South Vietnamese. It could be seen as a political, economic, and strategic center of Hanoi's attacks in the south.
The Ho Chi Minh Trail and the search and destroy tactics are only one part of the Vietnam War, and only two of the reasons for US defeat, but they are clearly important to consider. The Viet Cong was able to outmaneuver the US forces using their tactics as guerrilla warfare, and the failing strategy of the search and destroy missions initiated by the US, while the US Army training was not made for the conditions in Vietnam. Additionally, the scale and influence of the Ho Chi Minh Trail in the war were a clear factor of US loss. The Vietnam War lasted a near 20-year period and plays a great part in the Cold War as one of its worst conflicts and most major communist successes after the US failure to hold the South.